As the last 12 months have proven once again, the wild world of video game development is an insanely unpredictable one. Could anyone have expected Fallout 76 to end up one of the worst reviewed AAA games of the last few years? Or one of the year's most acclaimed games to be Celeste, an indie platformer developed by just a small handful of people? As 2019 looms and the cycle begins all over again, it's fair to say that some of the next year's most anticipated AAA titles have been raising some red flags as of late. While it would of course be lovely if every single one of these games ends up a pleasant surprise, if not a massive success, the numbers game says that at least some of them will no doubt fail to meet expectations. As ever, it would be wonderful to be wrong, but we'll just have to wait and see. My name is Rach, welcome back to WhatCulture Gaming. These are 13 reasons 2019's biggest video games might suck. 13. Style over substance. Kingdom Hearts 3. Despite being one of the most closely guarded AAA releases of 2019, Kingdom Hearts 3 was extensively previewed to the press at an invite-only event last summer, and the general consensus coming away was pretty mixed. Though there was praise for the visuals and how the game has incorporated various Disney IP, especially Toy Story, some critics also noted a feeling that it was an exercise in style over substance. The age-old complaints about the series' pesky controls and camera issues have been raised once again, and this is especially problematic as combat can be so chaotic, making it even tougher to keep up with the enemy onslaught than it surely should be. While 6 months probably isn't enough time to completely overhaul Kingdom Hearts 3's issues, it certainly gives Square Enix time to somewhat refine the floaty controls and the dodgy camera. And after all, Final Fantasy XV received overwhelming praise despite its glaring launch problems. Number 12. Open world fatigue. Anthem. Doesn't Anthem just look a bit, well, boring? Given the utter lack of trust that EA and BioWare have earned in recent years, it's incredibly tough to imagine this open-world multiplayer shooter being anything more than a shiny but soulless AAA offering centered around a tedious loot grind. Basically, with just a few months left until its release, EA has curiously downplayed what you can actually do in the game, rousing suspicions that it's set to be another Destiny. Stylish, but flat, and lacking a compelling lived-in world for you and your friends to inhabit. BioWare may have stumbled recently with that whole Mass Effect Andromeda stuff, but is that really enough to write off all of their prior successes? They absolutely know how to put together vibrant worlds on an epic scale, so ultimately it just comes down to how much reign the EA have given them. 11. Low budget development. Shenmue 3. If you forget the fact that Shenmue 3 is one of the most agonizingly awaited video game sequels of all time, there are a ton of red flags suggesting that it's going to disappoint a lot of people. Aside from the rather underwhelming smattering of clips and images released so far, the game is obviously being built on a far smaller budget than its AAA tier predecessors. As such, it's sensible to expect a more linear, low-key experience than the gigantic sandboxes which are very much the norm today. There's no denying the passion series creator Yu Suzuki is pouring into Shenmue 3, but with such scant resources to work from, it's best to expect mediocrity and be pleasantly surprised if it's anything more. 10. EA is involved. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It takes a special kind of incompetence to win the illustrious Star Wars license, and after 3 projects have desperately little to show for it. Star Wars Battlefront was a bit of a disappointment, and its sequel was somehow even worse, and despite having the most promise of the lot of them, Visceral Games' single-player Star Wars title ended up cancelled last year. So it's easy to be extremely skeptical about EA's new third-person campaign-based Star Wars game, because no matter the developmental pedigree behind it, the publisher has an infuriating knack for making gross business decisions which impact the quality of the end product. The flicker of promise comes from the game being developed by Titanfall devs Respawn Entertainment. Plus, there's that slight possibility that EA maybe learned something following the hostile response to both Battlefront games. Probably not, but stranger things have happened. Number 9. So many reasons. Crackdown 3. If you've been even remotely following the development of Crackdown 3, this one should be obvious. First announced back at E3 2014, the game has suffered through a laboured production with numerous delays, the curious downplaying of its much-hyped cloud destruction tech, and even rumours of its cancellation. While Microsoft should be vaguely commended for not just dumping the game and moving on, clearly it's been a rough time getting Crackdown 3 in ship shape. And from the pretty middling scraps of gameplay we've been shown, there's little reason to expect anything above heavily mixed reviews. Obviously it helps that Microsoft is sensibly releasing the game on their Xbox Game Pass service, which will likely soften the fan and critical response, at least a little. Number 8. It's just trying too hard to be edgy. Rage 2. Aside from being a wildly unexpected sequel to an indifferently received 2011 first-person shooter, Rage 2's marketing campaign so far suggests that it's trying way too hard to appeal to hyperactive teenage boys. Its bright, striking aesthetic is accompanied by a strong whiff of cynicism, as though dreamt up by a middle-aged marketing executive and then passed along to the dev team. To most people over the age of 18, it's fair to say that Rage 2 probably seems a bit exhausting, like your overeager nephew jumping up and down in front of you when you just want to enjoy a wee cuppa and watch some Netflix. Its willfully obnoxious style and tone aside, Rage 2's beat-to-beat gameplay actually looks quite robust and, dare one say, quite entertaining. It just depends on whether the gunplay and the exploration are persuasive enough for players to put up with its more grating window dressing. 7. There might be no campaign. Again. Call of Duty 2019. Well, despite introducing a well-crafted Battle Royale mode, Blackout, to the Call of Duty franchise, Black Ops 4 was widely criticised for scrapping a traditional single-player campaign mid-development, presumably to pour more resources into Blackout. Naturally, fans are wondering whether or not next year's COD game, presumed to be Infinity Ward's Modern Warfare 4, will in fact feature a campaign. Even if Infinity Ward has started work on a campaign for Modern Warfare 4, don't be surprised if Activision scraps it in order to focus on the next iteration of Blackout. Considering that Black Ops 4 had the best ever digital sales the franchise has ever seen without a campaign, there's probably not much incentive to bring it back. 6. A lazy Assassin's Creed ripoff. Skull and Bones. Ubisoft's new pirate actioner Skull and Bones has the unmistakable whiff of being a not-so-subtle rip-off of Assassin's Creed's much-praised naval combat, as was first popularised in 2013's Black Flag. That's not to say the game doesn't look fun, to a point, but from what's been shown off so far, the mechanics just seem too indebted to Assassin's Creed, without bringing enough new or intriguing to the table. Simply, it's tough to imagine how this can sustain an entire experience apparently worth a full AAA price tag. Ubisoft has confirmed that Skull and Bones will feature a narrative, single-player campaign, which at least calms fears that this could be another Sea of Thieves, that is, overly reliant on emergent gameplay. 5. The closed beta was terrible. Trials Rising. As brilliant as the previous Trials games have been, the closed beta for Trials Rising, didn't go so well. In addition to the surprisingly juddery frame rate and repulsive user interface, fans were outraged by the discovery that the final game will feature loot boxes. With barely 2 months to go until Trials Rising hits stores, it's not a good look, and for many fans the game has no doubt gone from a day one purchase to waiting for a sale. If Ubisoft can't sort the technical issues or resolve the PR kerfuffle surrounding loot boxes, at least fans won't have to wait too long for that sale. 4. The zombie genre is wildly oversaturated. Days Gone. The PS4's exclusives output has been on fire as of late, but it's tough to be enthusiastic about this open-world zombie shooter from SIE Bend Studio, who haven't released a firmly acclaimed AAA game since 2000's Siphon Filter 2. From the extensive gameplay shown off, Days Gone doesn't seem like much more than your typical open-world survival game, and numerous press previews from this year's E3 point to a game that's sorely in need of polishing and refinement. More than anything, there appears to be precious little personality to the characters or the world, which would be the fatal flaws in a game that wants you to invest dozens of hours exploring it. 3. It might not learn from the original's mistakes. Tom Clancy's The Division 2. Though Tom Clancy's The Division was generally well received by the critics, once the honeymoon period wore off, boredom quickly set in. With a visually stunning but soullessly empty open world and an abject lack of compelling post-game content, the name of the game quickly became rote repetition in the pursuit of shinier loot. As such, many played the game for a few weeks, jumped ship, and never looked back. Though Ubisoft insists that they have learned from the first game's mistakes, it's still incredibly difficult to be completely trusting when it comes to The Division 2. Given that it's going to sell like hotcakes regardless of its quality, one has to question if it'll simply end up just like Star Wars Battlefront 2, paying lip service to the notion of consumer-friendly practices, but actually doubling down on the total opposite. 2. It looks like a totally forgettable sequel. Gears 5. This might be a controversial opinion, but wasn't Gears 4 just a little bit boring? Yes, it was visually impressive and boasted slick cover shooter gameplay, but there was little inventive or original under the surface, resulting in an efficient but shockingly bland, forgettable campaign. The multiplayer was fine, of course. As such, it's hard to be particularly hype for Gears 5, which basically looks like it's going to spoon-feed fans another giant serving of the same old thing. It'll review well, that's for sure, but for anyone hoping the series might demonstrate any growth, creativity, or innovation, you're likely to be sorely disappointed. 1. The community could die out pretty quickly. Dreams. Back when Media Molecule's ambitious sandbox adventure game was still due out this year, we predicted that it could end up being 2018's No Man's Sky. A year later, Dreams has slid into 2019, and while the extensive gameplay footage has sold many on the depth of its creativity, there is one further hurdle: the community. Dreams is absolutely a game that will live and die on the enthusiasm of its fans, because it's players who will create the most mind-bogglingly imaginative worlds for others to explore. While the early days of Dreams are sure to be flooded with glorious creations, it's also easy to imagine the novelty wearing off quickly, especially once players discover the technical limitations. While the user-created maps will presumably remain persistently uploaded for future players to explore, Dreams could potentially become a years-long service if the user base holds firm. It's just a shame that, as history dictates, niche games of this kind tend to suffer a violent population shrinkage after the initial honeymoon period. It's not unheard of for online gaming communities to thrive far longer than anyone would reasonably expect. For instance, Halo 2 still had people playing until 2010, some 6 years after its initial release. And one can only hope that Dreams resonates deeply enough with players to keep them coming back for years. Fingers most certainly crossed for this one.